I'd like to start, and I'll make it as brief as I can. The night that we got the news, or the evening we got the news that our son was killed, my wife had gone to the coast in Belfast with her mom and a good friend of hers, and she came back on June 23rd, which is her birthday. It was about 5:30. She wanted to download some pictures for us to for me to look at. And while she was doing that, she was sitting at the kitchen table. I went in the other room, and we were going to go up to camp and watch the sunset. So I went in the other room, and I was looking for some paperwork, and I looked out the window facing the driveway, and there was a van pulled up. I didn't see the plates, and wondering who it was. And then all of a sudden, two soldiers, after 20 or 30 seconds, two soldiers in uniform stepped out, and all I could say was, "Oh no." I knew that our son was gone. I didn't know what happened. So I went in the kitchen and I told my wife, I said, "The military's here," and I said, "We've lost Joel." And she looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We've lost Joel." And I let him in the door. They knock on the door. They approach the table. I go beside her, and they ask her, "Is your name Deanna Arlene House?" She says, "Yes." And then they said, "Is your son Joel Amos House?" She says, "Yes." And they said, "I'm sorry to inform you, your son was killed this morning at 6 a.m. So, hearing that news, the soldiers stayed for a few minutes. They asked, "Is there anything else you can do?" And I said, "No." My wife's mom and a good friend of hers, my sister, were there to console my wife. And it was difficult for me just to watch her. It felt like somebody had reached in and pulled your heart out and just ripped it in half. So I went out with the soldiers outside, and I hugged them, thanked them, for coming, and I said, "I wouldn't want your job for anything in the world." And they left. My son Luke, who's here, he was in Washington State at the time. I called him up, and I told him, I said, "Luke," I said, "I got some bad news about Joel." I said, he was killed. And then my daughter, Joy, was in Florida, so I picked up the phone, called her, and I said, I have some bad news about Joel. And I said, "Joel was killed this morning." So I didn't want anyone else to call or her get the news, or Luke, from somebody else. So from that, there were 3 other soldiers killed, and an Iraqi interpreter and my son. So 5 people were killed in that one explosion. It was very catastrophic. So from that, our son was buried. His body came home about a week and a half later. We went to the airport off the Hammond exit, and some of our family members were lined up shoulder to shoulder. And the plane is sitting there, and there was another soldier on the plane from New York State that had been killed also. And Joel's cousin, Luke's cousin, his first cousin, was also active, still active, escorted his cousin's body home from Dover Air Force Base. And we're waiting there, and all of a sudden they roll the casket out in the opening, and they lower the casket down, put it in the hearse, and the feeling that comes over you is just, I can't put it in words. So we followed his body home to Lee. It's about a 50-minute drive to Lincoln, to the funeral home, and they open the casket up, make sure it's okay for us to see the body. So Luke and my wife and I and my daughter walk up to the casket and see our son laying there. And again, you can't put it in words when you see your loved one in a casket. But one thing that made us strong and keeps us strong is our faith. We knew when Joel was killed, he went to heaven to be with the Lord. We know that. And for us, that's a great comfort, knowing that he's with the Lord. And we're going to see him someday. We're just passing through. And for us, that's the ultimate. We're just passing through. So we want to help as many people as we can while we're here on this earth. So anyway, we went to Fort Hood to a memorial where 19 soldiers were killed. That in June, the month of June, they had a memorial in August. 19 soldiers were in this chapel. You got 19 families and all their pictures up front. All these young men were killed fighting for our freedom. And listening to the different stories from the different representatives of each of the soldiers, and then getting to meet with the families after was somewhat of a comfort. And then from that, we went to a home that the Laguerre family invited us to come to, where our son used to go after singles group at church, and during the duration of the memorial service. And they had a nice supper for us, had it catered. So we got to meet the family, the other three families, on a more personal basis, which was great. And the next morning I got up and was in the living room talking to the husband, Mark Laguerre, wonderful people. We were talking about the war and what had happened. And all of a sudden, tears just flowed down my cheeks. It's like God was calling me. It was like, wasn't verbally, but inside me, like, there's got to be a way we can help the Gold Star families. And then from there, I went to the veterans. That's where the idea for House in the Woods came from. And from that, went back home. Bill Emery and I, the other dad that lost his son, Blair Emery, we went to, I don't know how many wakes of soldiers that were killed here in the state of Maine, to show the families that we're here to support you, we know what you're going through. So we did that for quite a while. And as we worked on this project to try to get a nonprofit, it took us up to 3 years. I called people, my wife called people, we called veterans groups, we called politicians. There was a couple politicians, believe it or not, that were helpful. But so through all this journey, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but as we progressed closer and closer to getting our nonprofit, as I was telling Derek earlier, we were rejected twice by the IRS to try to organize this program. And for me, as a parent, losing my son, I can't even imagine anybody, when I explained to them, all we want to do is help veterans and Gold Star families. That's all we want to do. And they still looked on us like, we don't fit the criteria. Well, this is the ultimate. There's no other criteria. So I ended up calling the IRS anyway, on my own. We were 10 months, nothing was done. So I called the agent up, and we had 3 or 4 different conversations. Finally, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this program with or without your permission, so I'm confused. You tell us one thing, you want us to do another. So anyway, I guess she got tired of listening to me, transferred me over to her manager. I told him my story, or left a message. He calls me back 2 weeks later. I explained to him everything. He says, you know what, I'm a 20-plus year veteran. I'm going to help you get your nonprofit status. And then within 3 to 4 weeks, we had a letter in the mail saying we're a 501c3 nonprofit in 2010. That's how, in a nutshell, how we became a nonprofit status. Since then, we started with a fishing trip on Lower Sislodopsis Lake, and we did a bear hunt in 2010. And from there, every year we've added more trips. We do turkey, bear, moose, deer, and fishing trips. These are all 3 to 5 day retreats or 6 day retreats. In each event that these veterans come to, it's all free. The food, the lodging, and the hunts or fishing trip. There's no cost to them. Right now, we don't have the money to fly them in. Eventually, we want to pay the airfares if they have to fly. A lot of them will drive. But this year alone, the veterans shot, the state of Maine gave us 25 moose tags for the broccoli hunt, controlled moose hunt. They shot 24 out of 25 moose. Wow. And they've shot, I believe, around 64 moose they've shot with us since the 5-year period that we've been doing this. I think we shot 7 bear this year. Anyway, the whole idea of our program is to bring the vets together, and it's the camaraderie that makes the retreats what they are. I've seen vets come in with PTSD. Travis, you probably can relate to this a lot with PTSD and what soldiers go through. It's very difficult emotionally sometimes. And when they come in, they're very quiet. We had a gentleman, a soldier last year. He came into bear camp, and pretty much the whole time he was just sharpening his knife. He'd talk, but very rarely. Well, he ended up shooting a bear on Tuesday evening. Him and I had to track it, and I had to dispatch it and the whole thing. And it was quite an experience. It made him a little nervous. He was behind me. It was quite an experience. But Anyway, through that experience, he got up the next morning, clean shaven, and he says, I want to help your program. He went to a guide school that we provided money for, 5 or 6 vets we sent to a guide school. He came back this year, and he was a guide, and he helped guide other veterans. So this is the kind of thing it does, and I've had many vets approach me after the hunt or fishing trip and say, your program prevented me from committing suicide. So in saying all this, we could not do this program without support like you folks and other folks are giving us. We have had over 400 veterans attend our retreat since 2010. And we've had veterans from as far as California to Florida and Maine and everywhere in between. So the program is growing. We've had soldiers that have been wounded. We have soldiers that have not been wounded. I have seen vets out in the field hunting, sharing their stories, some Vietnam vets, 40 or 50 years of holding this inside, sharing their stories of the horrors of war and what they went through, and I've seen them tear right up. And this is an outlet because they would not come in necessarily and talk to the civilian world, but they will talk amongst themselves. And that's what, it's a simple concept that works. And it's very simple. We're just, I call it the good old boy. It's like going to hunting camp or fishing or going with your family for a summer vacation. You let your guard down, you relax, and it works. Like I say, some come in not even wanting to talk, and they end up being the ones that talk the most. But it's really neat to see the changes in their lives. And I cannot express, if any of you folks here want to come up and attend and talk to the vets, you're welcome on our trips anytime. It'll be a life changer. It'll change your life. It's changed our lives. And I want to share that with other people. So a big thank you to our veterans and those who have served our country in the past, who are serving today. And we have had veterans up to 90 years old from the Korean War veterans. We've had 3 or 4 Korean War veterans hunt with us. And we've had a mingle with veterans that are serving today, and they all have the same thing in common. And they share their stories with each other. So a big thank you to you folks for your support this past year, and I just want you to know what we feel as an organization and me as an individual, it comes from the heart. We're here to help veterans, and we want to continue this for many, many years to come. We're going to try to raise the money, $800,000 to $1 million to build a building to bring the vets to. We want a big great room with a big stone fireplace. Picture it, sitting around, places to talk where a lot of good conversations happen. We want a commercial kitchen and build a wing on either side to house up to 24 people. That's our goal. It's a big goal for us, but I know God's going to provide the money. I don't know how, when, or where, but He's going to. And things are rolling. Things are going really good. And I could probably stand here and talk for hours. I won't bore you anymore. But again, from the heart, thank you for your support, and thank you for being here for us, because it's very inspirational to be able to come here and to talk and to share. That was my time. So thank you.